Tuesday World Economic News. Let's kick off with Felix Salmon, who writes for Reuters now. He has been, to my mind, one of the best of trying to explain this foreclosure debacle. He puts ideas out there and is very receptive to feedback to try and get at the truth. Now, you can look at this foreclosure thing at different stages, at different times, but different stages. Was it right the way mortgages was sold to people that probably couldn't afford to pay them back? Let's keep it simple. Let's say those mortgages were sold to people and the banks then sold them bundled on to investments. They bundled them up in mortgage securities and sold them on to investment houses, probably your pension fund or something like that. So it's obviously a lot more complicated, but you can look left towards whether the banks were right the way they sold it onto pension funds, or you can look right to say whether it was right the deal that was made between the mortgage buyer and the bank. This particular one is looking this way, the right-left, towards whether the banks were disclosing proper information to the pension funds, for example, that they were selling the bundled securities of mortgages onto. Now, this particular one is called The Historical Echoes of the Mortgage Bond Scandal and opens with what did Wall Street used to be like before the Securities Act of 1933. Michael Perino's new book on Ferdinand Pecora, which I review here, reminds us, for instance, there was no National City Bank Peru deal. Now, Ferdinand Pecora is the interesting name in here. I can't go into the whole thing about who Ferdinand Pecora was, but he was set up, or he was in charge of a commission that would say, you might not have gone to the letter of the law, or that might have been to the letter of the law, but was it morally correct? It was not morally correct, you're going to jail. Somebody sat there and said, that's bad, that's okay, that's bad, that's okay. Something that people are demanding now. That happened in the Great Depression days. Now, looking at the banks selling on the bundled securities to, for instance, pension fund. Kid Dynamite has been on playing ping pong against Felix Salmon on this issue and comes in with, against my better judgment, I need to comment on this again and set new facts straight regarding material non-public information. Now, this is, most people would really like me to be talking or to be reading about the bank's dealings with the people. But this one, on this side, I find more interesting. And it's this material non-public information. Did they disclose the direness of what they were selling on? And Kid Dynamite says the information was there available and your pension fund should have looked into it more. They should have done their diligence more duly. And they didn't. So you lose money because whoever you invested your money with didn't do their job properly. That's on that side, and obviously it's a great oversimplification, but there we are. Moving on to Bruce Crasting and question to readers on modifications, mortgage modifications, and we're more looking this way now. I've been hearing a story this past week that intrigues me, says Bruce Crasting. There's blurb, and I take this from the blog article. What might a banker do if he was sitting on a pile of defaulted mortgages and now the traditional route for foreclosure was blocked? Obviously summing up what is now current. One possible response would be to get all the troubled borrowers to reaffirm their debt. The second is to get the troubled borrowers back to paying something on the mortgage, getting them to pay something on the mortgage. A loan modification would achieve both results. When a borrower signs up for a loan mod, they sign new papers. A portion of this process will establish any loan balance that is due. The language in the mod documentation could have new foreclosure terms that eliminate the banker's problems with past tainted documentation. Once a borrower makes a few months of new lowered payments, they are in effect confirming their acceptance of new terms. This is noted because on this side there was always a dearth of loan modifications coming from the banks. They didn't seem to want to do the mods, but there seems to be a tsunami of mods now being thrown out to the people. Instead of foreclosure, the mods are being accepted and say, come into the bank and sign the modification. And Bruce says, careful. Now, how you're careful, that's your due diligence. Bruce Crasting again on a different subject. Ben lied. Who? Ben B? Ben Bernanke. Ben's lies will cost us trillions and quite possibly our way of life. And his lie? He said, I am confident that the FOMC will be able to tighten monetary conditions when warranted, even if the balance sheet remains considerably larger than normal at that time. As we know, the Fed's balance sheet has ballooned up, money is out there, and the securities are in the Fed. What would happen if inflation takes over? The Fed would like to swap that over, and the securities to go out there, and the Fed sucks the money back into itself and tears it up and makes it go away and tries to make inflation go away. How they think they're going to sell mortgage-backed securities to the world, I don't know, and nor does Bruce. And in the end, this is how it finishes. He's getting quite riled about it because it used to be his business and he knows that Ben is lying. I want to hear from the primary dealers and the likes of PIMCO. Put them on a stand in DC and ask if they are confident that this can be accomplished. No one would. Get some former Treasury Secretary to opine. I would like to hear from Greenspan. No one would say that they are confident on the outcome. I want to see just one credible source chime in with Bernanke on this. Just one. Bernanke put his reputation on the line with his confident remark. How can anyone be so certain about such an uncertain future? And just repeating what he said at the beginning, Ben's lies will cost us trillions and quite possibly our way of life. In other words, if this inflation thing whoosh is out of control. FT.com, Italy and France try to curb EU reforms. I referred to that yesterday. Italy and France are making headway in a campaign to soften the potential impact of the most ambitious reforms of the Eurozone's budget rules since the Euro's creation in 1999, according to European diplomats and policymakers. This is what I was talking about yesterday, where they're trying to close the stable door and paint it in a pretty colour and decorate it with flowers when the horse is over the hills and far away. The French believe that mandatory debt reductions could encourage questionable accounting and one-off asset sales. More broadly, they contend that final judgment about government's fiscal policy should be taken at a political level. In other words, the French actually want to decide what to do with their own French taxes, and not based so heavily on numerical charts, which are obviously being pumped out by the Germans, who are saying, do this and this and this, exactly like Basel I, Basel II, making a firm grid of what they can do, with a maximum of 60% debt to GDP ratio, with the Italians already nearly up at 120. What do you do about them? And the Italians say, quite rightly, we're up here at 120, you want us down there at 60, you're going to fine us or whatever if we don't bring it down quick enough. But there are other things to be taken into account, and there are. Like the people aren't greatly indebted at all, but there are other nations that have got a lower national debt to GDP, but their private citizens are indebted up to the hilt. You can't just have German hard and fast rules and make them established, even if it was before the crisis. But now it's far too late. It's just a double farce. New economic perspectives. And Michael Hudson, while Labour unions celebrate Anti-Austerity Day in Europe, European neoliberals raise the ante. Government must lower wages or suffer financial blackmail. I'll run on and do this. I wasn't going to read it all, but I will, because it's Michael Hudson and he cares, and he has got some damn good points. I won't do the accent, I don't think, because you won't understand it all. The EC, European Commission probably, is using the mortgage banking crisis and the needless prohibition against central banks monetizing public deficits. No, I won't read it all, but basically he's saying they're coming up with new rules that basically are going to try and crush the people into paying back the bankers' debts. That's the long and the short of it. And saying this is unfair, unnecessary, crazy, destructive, and rolls back 80 years of social advancement. All right, Michael? All right, Nick? Yes. Second article, and last for the day, second from New Economic Perspective, and this is Warren Mosler, who was an investing wonder kid who's kind of retired from that and is trying to get into politics. And I'll cut this down to what his recommendations are for the United States. 1. We call a payroll tax holiday, i.e. tax reductions across the board. A revenue distribution to the states by federal government. Federal government prints up money and bungs huge quantities to the states on a per capita basis. A federally funded $8 an hour job for anyone willing and able to work. Federal or state governments will pay $8 an hour to anybody that is willing to work. That's not all that he suggests, but that is the précis in 1, 2 and 3. Going over to the Eurozone, I propose a distribution from the European Central Bank to national governments, very similar from Fed to states in America, of perhaps as much as 20% of GDP to be done on a per capita basis, so it will be fair for all the member nations. ECB should print up 20% of the Eurozone GNP or GDP and dole it out to the governments so they can spend it. Well, how do you think Warren's going to get on in the political world? Do you think he's going to be a big hit or not? I'll leave it there. Thanks. Bye.